Okay, so let's talk about lead guitars, and there's quite a few things to admit when it comes to the lead guitars, but I think it was one of the biggest mistakes that I made just because I didn't know better, and I recorded all the solos for the album and added them, and the whole chapter was closed for me. And then you asked me, or we never came to the point where I was satisfied with the sounds you came up with. And at one point you asked me if I recorded them on bridge or neck pickup, and I said on bridge pickup, of course. And you were like, no, seriously.
Because you wanted to have this very warm and full and round sound, but it just wasn't there.
Yeah, and I had no idea of how to accomplish that in the mix, and I never thought about it even. And we had to make that work afterwards by just finding a different sound, and this was really one of the most time-consuming parts of the whole album, because it's a guitar album and I wanted the lead guitars to shine, and that was very important to me. And we spent lots of time, and in the end what we did was I took all the DI signals and reamped them through my quad cortex, and I choose a sound which was extremely dark and extremely the opposite of what the DI signal sounded like, which was pretty thin and shrill. And yes, that was a way of getting it back to a point where it at least was usable. And I think there's lots of room for improvement on the second album.
Yeah, for sure. That was really a tough one. I mean, it haunted us basically throughout the whole process. Even late in the mixing stage, we were still on the lookout for a good solution on what to do, because re-recording was not an option. It would have been just too time consuming. And I think it's good now, but it could be way better if we do it with the right approach the next time. But I mean, it was all about learning, so there's no one to blame. How should you have known?
I'm not allowed to give an answer to that question. I could have known. I mean, you see all the guys when they switch to solo and they switch to the neck pickup for a reason, but I've never been that kind of guitar player who switches back and forth between the pickups. Back in the days when I was playing in a band, my guitar colleague, he did that all the time, and he switched pickups 5 times during a solo. But I always stayed on bridge pickup and went for it.
And you never had someone who was recording you, telling you on how to do it to sound the best on a record. So how should you have known? Because, I mean, of course you can observe, but if you don't feel the necessity and nobody tells you to, why should you incorporate it in your own playing? I think it's probably the biggest thing we can improve on. And of course, real drums. If you go and check our GoFundMe,
which doesn't exist
yet, who knows? Right?
Not yet.
Do you want to show us some of the lead guitars and maybe some of the DIs? Maybe we can show it just in a very transparent process to help others not to make the same mistake.
Yeah, that sounds very noble. So let's pick the solo, which sounds like this. Whoops. Sound disappeared.
Yeah, because it was so wrong.
And so on.
That's a prime example for the saying that you really have to make sure you capture the sound right. Because you can clearly hear it's not a bad sound, but it doesn't have the correct characteristics you were looking for, like this full, round and creamy lead sound.
Yes. And when we first started looking for sounds, I first went for the archetype Pliny once again, and it sounded like this. Which admittedly sounds pretty nice in itself when listening to it solo, but it didn't work at all when putting it on top of the song.
Yeah, it sounds too thin. It hurts a bit maybe, and it just battles the rhythm guitars when it comes to the sound. It sounds basically like a rhythm guitar.
Yeah, so what I did in the end was a reamping, which ended up sounding like this. And you see I had to do some additional tricks. I had to experiment with the amount of gain I put on the tracks, and sometimes I had to split solos or melodies and record them with different gains and put them back together. So yeah, we've been really working hard on what you can hear on the end result.
That was a tough one, yeah, but I mean, it sounds surprisingly good. I didn't think we would manage to do so. I mean, you did the reamping and stuff, so
yeah, I really wanted to get this right, and I insisted on, no, we're not set with this, we won't get away with this, we have to keep on trying, and luckily enough we found a solution in the end.
Yeah, next time this will be just like a summer breeze. It will be so easy. Just use the right pickup.
Yes, I already did. All the solos have been recorded, and I'm looking forward to hearing the sound we come up with.
Yes. So let's listen to it in the mix. It sounds way better than I would have ever imagined in the beginning. I was so scared that this is not going to end well, but it did.
Yes. And
this song was quite a challenge when it came to the lead guitars, not only because of the sound, but also because of the balancing. There are so many tracks going on. This was maybe the toughest thing for me, but I loved it because I just wanted it to be perfect, that it flows like the whole time.
And we really had some arguments about that song, and me demanding another revision when you said, no, it's fine that way. And I said, no, it isn't. This is a bit too loud, and that transition is not smooth enough. And in the end, you have to admit I was right.
No. I think your changes didn't make any difference at all. I didn't do anything when you told me to. Yeah, okay, you were right. I admit it.
We've got that on camera.
Yeah, we got that on camera.
So next, let's have a look at both, and especially at the clean guitars, because as in many situations, I came up with sounds which I really liked, but which didn't work in the context of the whole mix. And I think these clean guitars are a nice example of it. I'll first show you just the DI signal, which sounded like that. And I also had to redo, I think, all of the clean guitars, because I also recorded them on the bridge pickup, and they didn't turn out the way we intended them to be, and you advised me to use the neck pickup as well, and I did so, and that was the result, which I think sounds fairly good. And then I added an amp sim with lots of shimmer pedal, and it sounds like this. So, okay, I admit it's a bit shimmer heavy, but I really liked it, but somehow it didn't make it to the album, and I'm curious why.
Okay, now listen to the clean guitars in the production project we had. I did basically all the production of the sounds in Logic because of its ease of use. And the idea was to have all sounds settled before we go into the mixing phase, which didn't work because we found so many parts that didn't have the sound we wanted that we had to go back and forth in a later stage of the mix. That's a learning process, I guess. Now let's listen to the clean guitars. The sounds you had provided didn't really fit the mix in a way I wanted it to. I can't really recall anymore why. I mean, it's more like a gut decision. But I felt the urge to redo them, so I show you what I did and listen to them, and let's listen to them in solo. That's the plain DI signal. So what I did first was to edit it a bit with the EQ, and I wanted to boost a lot of the higher frequencies here. Just a bit more air. Next thing was a compressor, because it was quite dynamic and I really had some issues to have it, to make it consistent, and I wanted to make it consistent before it hits the amp. So as you can hear with the compressor, it sounds much more even. Next thing was some more EQ and compression going on, and a high-pass filter to get rid of all the low frequencies that we didn't need in this part. So let's hear it A-B. There's already a lot of that basically shimmery feel, what I wanted to have before it hits the amp. And then,
and that's really a big difference that
it
this
is.
last plugin made.
Yeah, it's really heavy-handed. I boosted a lot of top end, like here at around 12K, and a big boost of 6 dB at 2K, and I took out a lot of the low mid mud, minus 3 dB, so it's really a lot. And my favorite amp in the world, which I want to own one day, did the main sound. So let's turn it on. I felt that it had exactly what it needed for this part, because it sounds still very brilliant and very, very full. It's got a tiny, tiny bit of dirt, which you can't hear in the mix, but it just adds a bit of crunch to make it fuller. And yeah, so this was the amp I wanted to use, tried, and thought, yep, that's it. And last but not least, I took the shimmer idea from you, which is also a major part of the sound. I turn it on while it plays. So it adds a lot of three-dimensional character to it, and another EQ to boost more of that trebly, shimmery sound. So we can do one thing. Let's listen to it without any of the plugins. And then turn them all on. And I did the exact same thing on the other side. sound.
Yeah, what I find very interesting is that you always add a bit of crunch or distortion to the clean sounds, which was something I wasn't aware of that it's a thing to do. But yeah, you almost do it all the time.
I almost do it all the time. I almost do it to every vocal part. I almost do it to every snare drum, basically. Yeah, to many of the elements. Because harmonic distortion is not necessarily distortion as we would imagine it from a guitar amp, for example. It's a form of compressing the sound, of making it cut through more without actually being distorted. Yeah, so that's just a way of balancing, basically. Again, it's not so much about the distortion of the sound, it's about what it does to the sound in the context of everything else.
I see.
And we have another clean part in the second verse of the song, for example, where 3 guitars are playing at once. Let's listen to it for a second. Here I used a mix of different amps. I think this one is the high watt again, same settings as before, and this one is just an amp from Logic. They work pretty nicely together because the one
Excellent.
on the right side is much more thin and has more attack and has its counterpart in the high watt amp, which is deeper and more round. So yeah, it just creates a new sound again.
And what I'd be interested in, did you make these choices in context of the other song surrounding it, so of the drums and the bass, or did
Yes,
you come up
always.
with the vision for the clean guitars at first?
Nope. No, definitely not. I think I really went from top to bottom, basically. So I made a drum balance, nothing else. I mean, there's no drum processing in the song at all. There's only this trigger plug-in to create some samples, but apart from that, it's only the Superior drummer export. And I just made a rough balance. So I took a few tracks, a few dB down, and that's it. And then I started to add the other elements, and yeah, they try to build them on top of each other. So it was always in the context of the song.
So after the drums, you added the bass, and then you came to the clean guitars?
Yes, or distorted guitars, depending on which part. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think usually it was really drums, bass, then rhythm guitars, and then I went over to the parts with the clean guitars, because I also wanted to fit them to the part that had been played before. It's not only what's playing in this very second, but also over the timeline, basically. It shouldn't stand out too much. Yeah. Let's see how it sounded in the production project.
Push aside the branches, gaze into the well. Ripples on the surf.
And the vocals were quite important. It had to fit the vocals. They shouldn't fight for the same frequency regions too much. And yeah, it's about the character of the sound, basically.
So when you're looking back at the whole mixing and production project, were there certain spots that you were really proud of when looking back at them, and maybe you got like a story in your mind what you've been struggling with and how you overcame that struggle? Is there anything you could show us?
Yeah, there are quite a few parts, like the intro of First Awakening, where I think we didn't pay close attention to this balance of, or the perceived loudness, basically, of the drums in the intro. I didn't realize it in the drum programming project, but when I tried to fit it in the mix, the snare and the kick was always coming in way too loud, as nobody would probably play it. So I had to do quite a lot of automation on these individual tracks and also on the snare reverb track to make it sound like the drummer starts more quietly and progresses over time. Let's listen to it in context. I think it turned out quite nicely.
Yeah, and I've got to correct you in one point. I really spent lots of time in carefully adjusting the increase in volume or the way the drummer would hit the snare. But it's something totally different how it came out in the Progressive Foundry. And a third thing, how to incorporate it in the mix with the surrounding stuff. And I can clearly recall how long we struggled with that part and readjusted, raised it in volume at one place, reduced it in the other, had to balance it with the kick drum.
Yeah, there was always something sticking out. It
Yes.
was always a bit unpleasant, and it really, I mean, it looks fairly simple if we look at it now, but yeah, it's the subtle things again, the subtle changes that made the whole difference.